the Librarian of Congress, Dr. James H. Billington.
Good evening and welcome to the Library of Congress. This year, in the search for our next Poet Laureate of the United States, the Library of Congress reached out to 50 nominators from around the country, critics, scholars, editors, leaders in the field, and our past Poet Laureates. We received 76 recommended names. I read through packets of poems, then poetry collections to experience their diverse talent with vision and range. But no matter whose work I was reading through, I found myself returning to the poetry of Charles Wright. Tonight, I am delighted publicly to celebrate his appointment to the nation's only federally funded position for literature. Now, this is not the first honor the library has bestowed on Mr. Wright. In 2008, we awarded him the Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt National Prize in Poetry for Lifetime Achievement. And he becomes then the only winner of the laureateship specifically for lifetime achievement in the 22-year history of the prize, as well as the third Bobbitt winner to move on to the laureateship. After Louise Gluck, W.S. Merwin, Wright has also received almost more prizes than can be mentioned: the Pulitzer Prize, National Book Award, National Book Critics Circle Award, Ruth Lilly Prize for the Poetry Foundation, and the International Griffin Poetry Prize, among many others. Former Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, Wright is currently a fellow at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and a member of the Fellowship of Southern Writers. It was as part of the fellowship that Wright recently returned to the library to participate in a reading organized by then our previous Poet Laureate, Natasha Trethewey. Wright was born in Pickwick, Tennessee, now lives in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he's Professor Emeritus of Creative Writing at the University of Virginia. His poems often turn to the world of the South for its grounding power and imagery, yet they are just as likely to return to Italy, where, while stationed there with the United States Army, Wright famously fell in love with the poetry of Ezra Pound and Italy in general. His poetry does not fit into the storytelling tradition generally associated with Southern literature, but it echoes the spiritually charged syntax of Jared Manley Hopkins and the grand reckoning of Dante's Divine Comedy. As a Librarian of Congress for 27 years and as a champion of Russian literature, I admire how Wright dedicated himself to a 30-year project. He named it the Appalachian Book of the Dead, and how he has sustained an elemental beauty in poem after poem, in gracefully meditative forms. I also appreciate the gravity of his concerns, which he states are, and I'm quoting him, language, landscape, and the idea of God, as well as his counterbalance of humility and self-deprecating humor. A poem like Ancient of Days from Wright's new book, Caribou, captures this rare alchemy. It ends with these lines that I will read not as eloquently as he will himself. This is an old man's poetry, written by someone who spent his life looking for one truth. Sorry, pal, there isn't one. Unless, of course, the trees and their blow-down relatives are part of it. Unless the late evening armada of clouds Spanished along the horizon are part of it, unless the diminishing pinprick of light stunned in the dark forest is part of it. Unless, oh my, whatever the eye makes out and sends us on its rough road trace, to the heart is part of it. Then maybe that bright vanishing might be. I can say with certainty that Wright's poetry is a poetry for all ages and all times. For close to a half century, it has not only reported on what it's seen, but searched for whatever truth could be found there. The result is a music as singular, moving, and ultimately necessary as anything in our language. Please join me in welcoming Charles Wright, the 20th Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry at the Library of Congress.
I'm being called. The lights are everywhere. Thank you, Dr. Billington. Thank you very much for this great honor of being here. And thank you, Rob Casper, for being inexhaustible in your help and for writing that long goddamn introduction. Thank all y'all for coming, too. I really appreciate it. One always, at times like this, wants to thank one's parents, even though they're no longer around, because you want to hear them say, "Phew, boy, that was close, wasn't it?" The poems I'm going to read are pretty much in chronological order. And the first one is called Ars Poetica, which I think means the art of poetry. Sure. I always use that stuff. Oh, it starts out, I like it back here. Well, back here, when we lived in California, was where I had a little space carved out of the back of the garage where I used to work. Or I used to tell myself I was working. Anyhow. Ars Poetica. I like it back here, under the green swatch of the pepper tree and the aloe vera. I like it because the wind strips down the leaves without a word. I like it because the wind repeats itself and the leaves do. I like it because I'm better here than I am there, surrounded by fetishes and figures of speech, dog's tooth and whale's tooth, my father's shoe, the dead weight of winter, the inarticulation of joy. The spirits are everywhere. And once I have them called down from the sky and spinning and dancing in the palm of my hand, what will it satisfy? I'll still have the voices rising out of the ground, the fallen star my blood feeds, this business I waste my heart on, and nothing stops that. Can you hear me back there? No? Oh, Jesus. Sorry, Jerry. I thought this was a microphone. Can you hear me now? No? Now? Okay, wait a minute. Seriously, can you hear me now? Well, tough luck for you. This poem is called Mount Caribou at Night. Mount Caribou is a mountain up in Montana, northwest Montana, which can be seen from the place we go in the summer. My last book was called Caribou, which was supposed to have a picture of a mountain on it. But they sent me all those horns, and I said, well, it's a nice picture, so what the hell, let's use it. Since the titles of my poems have very little to do with the poems, then the cover of my book can have little to do with the poems themselves, too. There's a little